This past Thanksgiving, City Harvest delivered more frozen turkeys than ever before, and that's just the beginning. The COVID-19 pandemic has made New York City's hunger crisis even worse. Food insecurity is expected to rise 38% citywide this year and 49% among children. Joining me now is the CEO of City Harvest, Julie Stevens. Julie, always a pleasure. Thank you for being with us. Paint the picture for us on the ground. We're about 9 months into this pandemic. How much food has City Harvest delivered, and how does that compare to years past?
Well, Alexis, thank you for having me. City Harvest has seen an incredible surge in need in New York City, as I know we're seeing across the country. Since March, City Harvest has rescued and delivered 87 million pounds of food, which is a 95% increase over the same period last year. And in our fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th next year, our plan is to rescue and deliver over 118 million pounds of food, which is almost double what we had planned to do in this fiscal year. And all of this is to continue to try to meet the incredible increased need in New York City.
That is absolutely staggering, those numbers, Julie. What are you seeing in terms of how things are trending? Did the need or demand sort of peak back in March, earlier on in the pandemic, or is there now a new peak with this latest wave? How are things trending?
Well, that's really interesting because I always think it's important to remember that even before the pandemic, we know that 2.5 million New Yorkers were already struggling to make ends meet. There isn't enough household income to cover all the bills, rent, utility, medical, childcare, transportation, and still have enough to put food on the table. Now, we didn't see a peak in those early weeks of the pandemic. Of course, in New York City, many people were closed in at home. We began to see numbers really begin to increase in April, and they haven't stopped increasing. I would say we're still some distance from the peak. We've seen critical federal pandemic supports expire, such as unemployment benefit extensions, SNAP boosts, the eviction moratorium. All of those, now they're expired, are things that will continue to place a heavy burden on families. And we're seeing more and more New Yorkers. It's estimated 1 in 3 New Yorkers have turned to a food pantry this year. That's a 250% increase over last year, which is really phenomenal. And I do believe we haven't yet seen the peak of this.
Wow, we haven't yet seen the peak. I mean, you just touched on it, but hoping you can expand on it a little bit. How many of the people coming to you for assistance are seeking that assistance for the first time?
A very high number. We know through some analysis done by the Robin Hood Foundation that 1 in 3 New Yorkers are turning to food pantries for the first time. So, we can extrapolate from that of the 12 million or so visits that we've seen in the past several months, which is already up from about 7.5, 8 million in the same period last year. Many of them will be coming for the first time. And conversations we've had with people standing in line, families who are coming for the first time, people who do everything right. They have jobs, they've lost their jobs, family members have become ill with COVID, are grateful that there's somewhere for them to come in the neighborhood and get food. And with City Harvest, most of the food that we're distributing is fresh fruits and vegetables, which is critical.
Talk to me about those donations. Are they mostly monetary donations? Are they food donations? And how have you been able to keep up with the demand? Are you actually in need right now of those donations? I'd imagine you are.
Well, we're very grateful. City Harvest is largely privately funded, and we've been able to grow to projected at least 118 million pounds only through the generosity of our financial donors. We depend on them. And of course, today is Giving Tuesday, an important day in the calendar to support organizations like City Harvest. And in fact, at City Harvest, through a very generous donor who's provided matching dollars of 90,000, we're hoping to reach that $90,000 through donations today that will help us feed 5,000 families through December, just through Giving Tuesday donations alone. In a typical year, all of City Harvest food is donated, with the exception of Thanksgiving turkeys, which we can never get donated. When there's an emergency, we have a disaster feeding plan. Our disaster feeding plan was triggered on March 9th. And one of the key elements of that plan is that we start to buy food. And at this point, we've spent about $6 million this year alone on buying food in that we can distribute to families across the 5 boroughs of New York City. So I would say in any disaster, we're buying food. We can only buy it through the generosity of donors who are providing support year round. And especially today, we hope on this Giving Tuesday.
And Julie, if people listening want to reach out and help, how best can they do that?
Well, we have our website is cityharvest.org. And so there's a lot of information there, including a critical map, which shows anybody who needs food where they can go in their neighborhood to find food. And that's something that we update constantly. It's our most visited page after the homepage. And then after that, there's a donation page where people can make their donation on Giving Tuesday or any other day. And for those who want to volunteer, all the resources are there on our website, cityharvest.org.
Well, certainly critical work that you and your team continue to do year after year, and most especially during this pandemic. Julie Stevens, CEO of City Harvest, thank you.
Thank you.